Welcome into Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, we react to the Philadelphia Phillies opening day roster. Who made it? Who didn't? Are there any surprises? Of course there are. And how does it stack up to my initial opening day roster projection? We'll see how close I got. And we'll also talk a little bit still about the first base situation and how the Phillies seem to be handling it. A lot on a packed Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is indeed Locked On Phillies. I am your host, Connor Thomas. Been talking Phillies baseball for years here, entering my second season as host of Locked On Phillies here with opening day just a day away. Cannot wait for tomorrow. It's going to be absolutely awesome. I want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. All right. Let's jump into the opening day roster because we basically have it out. Now, I do want to let you know at the time I'm recording this, nothing has been officially released by the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, these are the guys who are left. So there's a chance that between me recording this and when you listen to it, there's a roster change, like they'll go sign somebody or trade for somebody. I don't know. I can't predict that type of stuff. But of the guys they currently have available to them, these are the guys that seem to have made the Major League roster. So not only am I going to give you my reaction to the players who made it, we're going to compare it to my opening day roster projection 1.0 from weeks ago when spring training first got going and see how close I was to being accurate. We'll see if I nailed it or not. Let's start with the position players, and then in the second segment, we'll get into the hurlers, the pitchers. But starting, simple one, knew we were going to get this right. The catchers that made the Major League roster, JT Realmuto, Garrett Stubbs, both on the opening day 26-man roster. So those guys are all set up. I'll go ahead and I'll scroll over to what was my opening day roster projection. And hey, would you look at that? I had back on, let's see the date of this, February 8th. Remember, February 8th. We're on March, what's day? You're going to be listening to this on March 29th. Yeah, this is, I nailed it. JT Realmuto and Garrett Stubbs were the catchers that I had there for the opening day roster. Let's move on to the infield because there's no surprises with the catcher. There's really no commentary to be had there. Those are the clear choices at catcher, despite the weirdest ejection in the history of baseball with JT Realmuto. And trust me, at some point we're going to get into that. There's just so much we have to do as far as opening day stuff that's just it's kind of more of a sideshow, but you saw that go viral. If you had a pulse yesterday and we're on social media, you saw JT Realmuto getting thrown out of a spring training game for not having eyes in the back of his head. Stupid. Anyway, both make the roster. Let's go to the infield. The infielders who have made the opening day roster. You have Bryson Stott, Trey Turner, Alec Bohm, Edmundo Sosa, Josh Harrison, and Derek Hall. And when you look at that, you say, oh, okay, I get each and every one of those. Your starting infield is going to be Stott, Turner, Bohm probably at third, Hall probably at first, even though it's worth noting that today in the Philadelphia Phillies final spring training game, and I say today, it'll be yesterday by the time you listen to this, but the Phillies final spring training game, they had Edmundo Sosa start at third with Alec Bohm starting at first. Now, they've also come out and said that Derek Hall will play a lot of time at first base, and he's going to be basically your everyday first baseman. I don't know if this was a give Bohm a test run before you leave spring training type of deal. I don't know. That's a decision that the Philadelphia Phillies made today. It was an interesting lineup. So we'll see. What's much more important, of course, is what the lineup is on opening day. And I'd be very surprised if it wasn't Derek Hall at first base. Even if it's not, though, doesn't mean it's the most common lineup. Remember, Bryson Stott played third base on opening day last year, and Alec Bohm did not. So we know that Alec Bohm ended up playing most of the time at third base for the Phillies, and things can change. But right now, I'd say Derek Hall is your starting first baseman, Bryson Stott starting second baseman, Trey Turner at shortstop, Alec Bohm at third base, Edmundo Sosa and Josh Harrison are going to be your utility infielders. When I look at my first projection, I had Rhys Hoskins, Bryson Stott, Trey Turner, Alec Bohm, Edmundo Sosa, and Josh Harrison making the team. Now, in fairness, I've added Derek Hall as we went along in the spring. And if you had told me back on February 8th, Rhys Hoskins is not available, well, I would say Derek Hall unequivocally makes the team. So uh, chalk me up at 100% still. Please cut me a break. Didn't know Rhys Hoskins was going to have a severe injury that would cost him probably the season. By the way, he's undergoing ACL surgery. I believe it is tomorrow. It'll be today when you listen to this. See, this is why I can't record episodes early. I put my mind in a pretzel when it comes to the timing of things. Rhys Hoskins is going to have ACL surgery this week, though. So, yeah, I'm basically on par with that. Not surprised at all. Anyone who thought Scott Kingery was making this team, I think you're crazy. It's just such a competitive team. You didn't bring in Josh Harrison to not make the roster. Edmundo Sosa was 100% going to play. Derek Hall was a guy that was always going to make the team once Rhys Hoskins went down. And I think he would have even if Hoskins didn't go down. But I've been telling you all spring, the outfield depth is weak. If you have a chance to add another player in the outfield, you do that. And with the Rhys Hoskins injury and Derek Hall now taking that spot, well, the Derek Hall spot that we talked about, in addition to Rhys Hoskins, becomes an extra outfielder. So let's go ahead and look at the outfield and see how close we got to this one on the opening day roster projection 1.0. The outfielders making the opening day roster for the Phillies: Kyle Schwarber, Brandon Marsh, and Nick Castellanos are your starters. Jake Cave and Dalton Guthrie are your depth pieces. And let's go over to the projection 1.0 for my opening day roster. And let's just read down this list here. Schwarber, Castellanos, Marsh, Guthrie, Cave. Exactly how we thought it was going to happen, right? Now, I went back and forth a couple times because Dalton Guthrie didn't have a good camp. The only reason he's on this roster is because Rhys Hoskins got hurt. Otherwise, I do firmly believe it would have been Schwarber, Castellanos, Marsh, Cave, and then you would have used the extra player spot to have Derek Hall up as your DH as a position player in the infield. So Guthrie is a beneficiary of the Rhys Hoskins injury, and that he probably would have been a AAA if not for that case. Another reason, though, why I don't think it was ever Scott Kingery. Like, there are so many guys in line ahead of him. Did Kingery have a better fall? Did Kingery have a better spring than Dalton Guthrie? Yes, I firmly believe he did. That being said, the team likes Guthrie more. He hasn't really soured their expectations at the major league level, whereas Scott Kingery, when he plays at the major league level, just frankly isn't very good. And yeah, that's why Kingery's at AAA and Guthrie's at major league level, because I don't think the organization still trusts Scott Kingery. And I think they have some faith in Dalton Guthrie to still advance, but it's more, hey, let's go with Guthrie, who can still, we haven't seen at the major league level, and maybe he'll give us a pop, as opposed to Scott Kingery, who we kind of know what we're getting, and it hasn't been enough in the past. So those are your outfielders. Not a bad 100% on the outfield, by the way. So you could argue that not counting the Hoskins injury and replacing Hall, who I had on my final projection anyway, you're looking at perfect opening day roster projection from your boy back on February 8th. So not bad. I'm happy with myself and the work that I put in there. And I don't have any issues with anything the Philadelphia Phillies did. Their position players look exactly how they should to me. That's what I expected to happen. That's the way it should be set. It was easy to predict because this team's so top heavy. And they have so many guys locked into starting spots in the lineup that there weren't too many position battles. So it shouldn't come as too much of a surprise to anyone on the position player side, except for like some people who thought the Kingery was going to make the team early on, people who got on Weston Wilson when he was hitting a couple home runs in the first couple games of spring training. This just shows you a lot of times when you have a really good team, the position players end up being chalk. Well, the roster itself ends up being chalk. And we'll talk more about that when we get into the pitchers as we break that down. But there are a couple surprises with the pitchers. I did not go 100% on them. This also has to do with a couple injuries, but I wasn't as close, and I can't take as much credit. We'll discuss coming up, and I'll give you my thoughts on some interesting names to be on the Major League roster as we continue Locked On Phillies. First, let me tell you about my friends over at FanDuel, though. The tournament is heating up. We're coming down the home stretch, and there's no better place to get in on the basketball action than FanDuel. America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. It's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net to some of my favorite bets, which I gave you in Monday's episode. So you can go back and listen to that and where I would place some of my money based on some of FanDuel's odds on the baseball season upcoming. And it's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. And they are just the absolute best, the sports book of Locked On. All right, I want to get into the pitchers who have made the Philadelphia Phillies opening day roster. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about our Major League Baseball season preview. Get ready for baseball season with Locked On MLB's Ultimate 6-episode season preview. Our local and national experts give in-depth analysis of every team and division in a way only Locked On can provide. Find all 6 episodes on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, and you'll go ahead and see that from Locked On Phillies, as well as the NL East episode should post this past Tuesday. So you should be able to go back and find my discussion with the other NL East hosts about what's going on with the division, and a very interesting division, one that we talked to Tim Kirkchin today on 97.5 The Fanatic on the John Kincaid Show. He called arguably the best division in baseball. So you're going to want to go ahead and check that out. Now, let's go through the starting rotation for opening day and how it's going to track out. Aaron Nola obviously has made it. He's your opening day starter against the Texas Rangers on Thursday. Zach Wheeler obviously has made it. Taijuan Walker has made it. Now, we don't know whether or not he's going to start Game 3 because he got back late from the World Baseball Classic due to Mexico making it to the semifinals. If he doesn't start Game 3, it'll be Bailey Falter, and then Walker will start Game 4. And then Matt Strahm is your 5th starter to start the year. Strahm, who most recently started for the Padres, I believe, back in 2019. The only other player on the Major League roster with starting experience or significant starting experience at the Major League level. So he's got like 100-some career innings as a starter. But you got the hair duo down there at 4 and 5 with Falter and Strahm, who both have that long flowing hair. We'll see how that plays out. Going to be a little bit different than what I projected, obviously. So I had the opening day roster projection version 1.0 as Wheeler, Walker, Nola, Suarez, Painter in no particular order. And Ranger Suarez not being on here is because, well, he's dealing with the forearm tightness. And that means that you have to elevate these guys from the bullpen in Bailey Falter and Matt Strahm, or from the minors, where I might have started Bailey Falter if he wasn't in the rotation, to keep him even with where you've got the rotation throwing in case he needs to be called up. Well, now those guys are forced into the starting rotation. So the only reason Suarez and Painter, again, are not on the opening day roster, injuries. Frankly, I think it would have been them, and I don't think anyone would argue that. But the way it ends up stacking out is Nola, Wheeler, Walker, possibly Game 3, possibly Game 4. Falter, same, possibly Game 3, possibly Game 4. And Matt Strahm, we know, has Game 5 in New York against the Yankees as part of that series. And then it'll reset, and Nola will have the final game of the Yankees series. If you are going to the home opener, it looks to be slated out to be Zach Wheeler. So you get Nola on opening day for the season. You get Wheeler on opening day at Citizens Bank Park. That's about as perfectly as you can have it set up. So that's a pretty nice little break for the Philadelphia Phillies, that they can have their 2 aces go in the opening day and home opener type of circumstances. Rare that you see that. So that's cool. But yeah, that's your starting rotation. No real surprises there with the injuries. There were some people at the start of spring training that thought Nick Nelson might go ahead and vie for a spot in the starting rotation. You remember what I told you? I said they're crazy. Nick Nelson didn't even make the team. To think he could have been a starter on this team, I think was far-fetched. But all right, let's jump into the bullpen now. So the top 4 that look to be making the opening day roster are Anthony Dominguez, Jose Alvarado, Gregory Soto, and Craig Kimbrell. No surprise there. My top 4, Soto, Kimbrell, Dominguez, Alvarado. You were looking at a situation where they're all proven major leaguers. You traded for one of them in Gregory Soto this offseason. You went ahead and acquired Craig Kimbrell, who was with the Dodgers last year via free agency, via, however you want to say it, VIA free agency. And now he is here with the Philadelphia Phillies as a guy that's been one of the better closers in a generation of baseball. So no surprises for those guys making the team. Next two guys I had listed were Brogdon and Strom. Now, of course, Strom in the rotation due to injury. So let's call it Brogdon and Bellotti, who is the next guy down after Strom. The next two guys listed on the projected roster. Nothing confirmed here, but these are the guys who are available, are Brogdon and Bellotti. So that was all cool. I felt very comfortable about all of those guys. I did have Nick Nelson listed. I didn't think he wasn't going to make the roster. I just thought there was no way he started. But yeah, nothing there as far as your opportunity for Nick Nelson to make the team. The final two bullpen spots are Junior Marte and Andrew Vasquez. Very, very interesting to me about that. And I also had, I was looking at, that's where I had the two guys that are replaced by Marte and Andrew Vasquez were Strom, who's in the rotation, and Nelson, who's now in the minors. As my hair is all over the place if you're watching on YouTube. You're looking at a situation where two young guys get an opportunity, both, though, with some major league experience, and both from the San Francisco Giants last season. Now, Junior Marte had a lot more experience. He was a guy that had like 40-some innings for the Giants. He had like a 5.4 ERA, but he's got some solid stuff. He's a young player who debuted last year, who got an opportunity out there with San Francisco. The Phillies acquired him. And I remember when they acquired him, I said, okay, well, this is a guy that he's going to be either a top-end AAA bullpen guy and might show some stuff at the major league level, or he's going to potentially fight for a position at the back end of the opening day roster. And then before the injury struck, I mean, he wasn't even on the radar. But because I thought Matt Strom was going to take up the spot needed, and I thought you were going to use the extra position elsewhere in the infield to bring Derek Hall up in addition to Rhys Hoskins. But with Derek Hall making it and no Rhys Hoskins, you had the open roster spot, and it is used on Junior Marte, and then Andrew Vasquez gets the one that would have gone to Bailey Falter were he in the bullpen and Andrew Painter was in the rotation. And so what to expect from those two young guys? Well, the biggest thing is they're going to have to eat some innings early. Now, Andrew Vasquez has maybe 10 career major league innings. He threw 2 last year, I think. I think 3 years ago he had an infinite ERA because he only made 1 appearance. Like, he's not a guy that's been significantly used at the major league level. He's going to be the least utilized of anybody on this opening day roster. But when you look at a guy like Junior Marte, you're going to have a guy that you go to a good amount during the start of the year. These are the guys that are going to have to eat up innings because your long relievers, Matt Strom and Bailey Falter, are in your starting rotation, making up for Ranger Suarez and eventually Andrew Painter not being available. I think Bailey Falter is more of a starter than a reliever at this point, but with this roster, he could be either because the rotation could be so good when those two other guys are healthy. Now, your long relievers are probably going to be Andrew Bellotti, Junior Marte, Connor Brogdon, Andrew Vasquez. And people have asked me about how the bullpen's going to carry the team as far as making up for starters that are hurt. And to me, it's not those big 4 guys. It's not Dominguez, Alvarado, Soto, Kimbrel, because you don't want to burn them out in March, April, May, and June. You want them ready for the postseason when your bullpen turns into basically a 4 or 5-man bullpen as opposed to a, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8-man bullpen that you go into opening day with. So that means the onus falls on the young players to go ahead and work everything out in the early parts of the season, kind of bail out the vets a little bit and eat up some of the innings while the older guys get stretched out. So Junior Marte and Andrew Vasquez, they're going to pitch for this team. Marte significantly more than Vasquez, but still 2 names that you have to know to see him coming out of the pen, possibly as early as opening day, depending on how that game goes with the Rangers tomorrow. So names to know, guys with slight major league experience in Vasquez's case and good major league experience in Marte's case, and guys that could both, they've earned their spot. They've earned their spot on the roster, and they rounded out. So, again, let's just read through this one more time. Realmuto and Stubbs at catcher. Hall, Stott, Turner, Bohm, Sosa, and Harrison in the infield. Outfielders are Schwarber, Marsh, Castellanos, Cave, Guthrie. Rotation is Nola, Wheeler, Walker, Falter, Strom. And the bullpen, Dominguez, Alvarado, Soto, Kimbrel, Brogdon, Bellotti, Marte, and Vasquez. Your 2023 Philadelphia Phillies opening day roster, hopefully soon to be joined by Bryce Harper at some point in the season and maybe Andrew Painter and everything, but that's who they roll out with in Texas come tomorrow. So there you have it. Now coming up, we're going to wrap up with a little off the poll. We haven't jumped back to our poll results on what the preferred option for the fan base is for Rhys Hoskins' replacement at first base. So we'll jump into the responses to our Twitter poll in the next segment as we wrap up with a little off the poll here on Locked On Phillies. First, though, I want to tell you about Ultimate Pro Baseball GM. Pro Baseball GM is the coolest game I've played in a long time. It's awesome. Like, on your phone, you can't really get the realistic, like, have to pay $60 for some video game that has a bunch of bugs and everything like that, and all these unnecessary features that you don't really need. No, that's not Pro Baseball GM. You can go ahead and download it. Free app. Go ahead and check it out. And it lets you take control of a Major League franchise, be a Major League GM. It's not that easy. Trust me. It's that easy to download the app. It's not that easy to be a Major League Baseball GM, though. It's certainly challenging. If you've ever had that thought of, like, I could run a franchise, I could be Dave Dombrowski, who I guess is technically president of baseball operations. You get what I'm saying, though. You can go ahead and check it out. The game allows you to do so many things, from signing players and international players and trades and sponsorship deals, and you're looking at uniform contracts and everything like that. You're signing coaches and hiring managers and stuff like that. It covers everything from start to finish of a Major League season. Every little bit is in. You try and build a roster that's competitive, and then you go ahead and see how your team plays it all out. But it's fun to run a franchise and see if you have what it takes. All of this is done in a challenging and realistic game world. It's completely free, playable offline too. So you can play on the go as you want to and where you want to. So it's great. And the best part is Locked On Phillies listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com and scan the code, or look it up on the app stores. That's probaseballgm.com. Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. Let's take a quick look at off the poll question from this weekend, which is where I ask a Twitter poll at LO_Phillies on Twitter, and you respond, and then I go ahead and read the responses and share what I think about the fan base's mentality on it. Our off the poll question for this past weekend: which of these is your preferred option for replacing Rhys Hoskins at first base? Your options were Derek Hall at first base, Alec Bohm at first base, a Hall, Bohm, JT Realmuto combo, or a corner outfielder at first base. So we got 2% of the vote, which equals out to just like 3 voters, I think, if my numbers are correct, saying Alec Bohm should play first base. That was the lowest bit, which is interesting to me because in Tuesday's final spring training game, Alec Bohm played first base. So I don't know. I guess the people are very out on moving Alec Bohm, even though I've seen that a lot of places that it's an interesting thing for them. It's even lower than having a corner outfielder like Nick Castellanos or Kyle Schwarber at first base. 6% of the vote went to that. So there's 8% there. That means there's going to be some high percentages for the top 2 options. 22% of responders said they want the Hall, Bohm, JT combo at first base, and 70%, nearly 3/4 of all responders, said Derek Hall should play first base as your main everyday first baseman. That's where I was. That's what I think is the right option. Honestly, I was surprised the Bohm at first base wasn't higher. That would probably be my second best option. Third best being Hall, Bohm, JT combo, and fourth best being a corner outfielder at first base. But the 2 most interesting things to me: the fan base in lockstep with the team, that Derek Hall seems to be the first baseman for at least the first month or so of the season as they figure out what they've got. And then you're looking at a situation where Alec Bohm being the least vote getter on this poll is just, it's strange to me. But I guess the fan base doesn't want to see him move because of the strong spring he's had. So there's the fans' thoughts ahead of opening day on who's going to play first base. And we'll go ahead and see what happens when the roster comes out and the lineup. Well, not the roster, but the lineup comes out. But there you have it. That's off the poll. And that's our responses to our off the poll question from this weekend. That's all for today's Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Now I want you to make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Baseball. You've only got one more day till opening day. Go ahead and check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball, and you can win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to our YouTube here at Locked On Phillies. It really helps me out. It takes just a second and it improves your experience greatly, so I do appreciate it. And hey, we got opening day tomorrow. We finally made it. It's going to be so much fun. Cannot wait to talk to you then on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.